From the moment I saw Highguard, it immediately looked like it was never going to survive past a month at best with the full capacity of the studio behind it. People attacked me, said I was wrong, and others claimed that Highguard was in some weird culture war position when it really wasn't at all. This game wasn't pandering to identity politics, it didn't have developers calling people names or any other controversy that plagues the downfall of other games before it. Highguard was simply just not a good game. It may have pained those who made it to hear that, but it is what it is. If this were not the case, then the game would not have lost their entire player base in little under than like 2 weeks. Some called it a Concord 2, and people laughed at that, yet within the same time frame as Concord lived and died, Wildlight has, as you can see here from MSN.com, Wildlight has now officially laid off the vast majority of their staff only 2 weeks since Highguard officially launched. And later on, I'll also show you how one developer has decided to go scorched earth and blame content creators and users online for the downfall of the game instead. This video is going to be a mess, so let's get into it. But just so in case somehow people don't believe this to be true, Wildlight said this via Twitter. Today, we made an incredibly difficult decision to part ways with a number of our team members while keeping a core group of developers to continue innovating on and supporting the game. We're proud of the team, talent, and the product we've created together. We're also grateful for players who gave the game a shot and those who continue to be a part of our community. So the plan here is to keep a skeleton crew of the most essential staff at Wildlight to keep Highguard up and running for the foreseeable future. I would assume this is being done so that the roadmap that they featured at launch would be released at least, because each episode, as they called it anyways, which is sort of like a season but not really, would have new maps, new heroes, and guns and whatnot being added to the game as well. Maybe the hope, I guess, is to release all of this content that has already been made in the pipeline in hopes that these episodes, the player base will maybe grow and eventually Highguard can become something great and then people can be rehired down the line. It's a wishful thinking situation, I know. At the very least, Highguard, at least for now, has lived longer than Concord did, which isn't saying much, but it's become increasingly clear that this game is just not doing well, as seen here on the Steam charts. We're down now to 1,300 players on Steam with an all-time peak of 97,000 just 17 days ago. Yeah, this is, come on, man. Highguard is retaining about 1% of its player base since launch right now. Honestly, I'm not surprised by any of this. I still think if they want to turn this around, they do need new game modes in that game, and just like what you can do there right now is just not it. I just gotta be honest. But since they laid off pretty much everyone already, I don't know if Wildlight even has the manpower now to even actualize any of the fixes that the game even needs in the first place. This just gives me Kill the Justice League vibes, I gotta be real. Like, that game was meant to be this years-long live service shooter, right? But by the end of year one, its online capabilities ceased and were gone, and the content made for Kill the Justice League was released, and then that was it. Obviously, we can all likely agree that this let's push for more live service games sort of thinking, it kind of needs to stop now before it gets even worse, because the success stories are so few and far between in this particular genre of games, it's getting beyond concerning. Highguard could have been a cool Borderlands-like open-world co-op game, but instead it ended up being what it is. The original whistleblower of this entire thing was a level designer at Wildlight named Alex, where he said this via LinkedIn. Unfortunately, along with most of the team at Wildlight, I was laid off. This one really stings. There was a lot of unreleased content I was really looking forward to that I and others designed for Highguard. See right there? Lots of unreleased content. Yeah, so they are doing what I said they're doing. They're going to keep the lights on, release that content that's already made, maybe faster than expected to do, probably to, entice people to hopefully come back so the game doesn't just die right away, and then spend hopefully more money on cosmetics so they can keep going. But I think at this point, it's not really going to happen. The likely scenario here is Wildlight just closes up shop eventually. They delist the game like Concord did, refund all microtransactions to everyone who bought one, and they probably take the tax write-off route instead, where they don't get back all the money they spent on the game, but a portion of what they spent is returned in write-offs. But that system only works if the product made was not technically sold and made any money itself. Hence why they would legally then have to refund everyone for their cosmetics cosmetics that they bought to get that lump sum back in theory, which means that Highguard will just have to come out, make essentially nothing, disappear, and then that's really it. That's its legacy. Investors are likely very mad though. I mean, if I invested millions into something like this and in 2 weeks it died, I would become Frieza and nuke the planet out of anger. But again, like I keep saying, the genre is dying, or I guess maybe dying isn't the right word. Saturated is probably better to describe it. Like, there's just too many of them. You're better off doing literally anything but a live service game at this point. It's no surprise that a vast majority of the success stories are single player games that may have some live service elements to them, but they retain that single player point for a reason. I think how Batman Arkham Knight back in 2015 did it is pretty much perfect. Your game is single player, right? You add more content like a live service, like, via the expansion pass, I mean, but the core of the game is not always online multiplayer or anything like that, if that makes sense. Why the industry moved away from this? Probably greed, if I have to guess, but what's happening proves it is just not working. We then had another dev named Marco, who is a 3D animator in the games industry. They didn't work on Highguard, but they're talking about it. But anyways, they responded to that level designer's LinkedIn post about Wildlight laying everyone off, and his comments, they're scathing, I gotta be real, but it's also brave of him to say this, because he's right. But here's what Marco said publicly, by the way. Let me read it for you. How many times do countless developers have to suffer the disastrous consequences of someone pitching a PvP competitive multiplayer game featuring generic fantasy concept art looking characters? Everybody at this point knows that it's a studio death sentence. We need to start having serious conversations about this as a problem that's plaguing our industry. I've started to document how many layoffs have happened so far from projects like this, and it's insane. Whole studio shutdowns every single time. And you can see the person below him named Andoni tries to then shame Marco and say him saying that publicly is a bad look, but it really isn't. We need to have these hard conversations, because if we're not truthful in what we're saying, things can never get better. Like, nothing that Marco said is controversial either. He's right in what he's saying. There's too many layoffs and wastes of money and time being used by studios to make the next Fortnite when it is not going to happen. The likelihood is that if these studios made anything but Fortnite, but pretty much worse, they would still probably be around. But it just keeps happening, right? Crazy too that ex-Concord devs worked on Highguard, in case you don't know, and yet the same outcome. It happened to them again. There has to be someone there who saw this and went, holy crap, dude, we just repeated history again despite having the blueprint to not follow, and they still did it anyways. But I do think this toxic positivity nonsense doesn't really help anyone. If something sucks, you need to just call it out for what it is. Otherwise, how does it get better? It can't. That's the answer. If you think your slop is actually S tier because everyone is huffing each other's farts at the office, it doesn't lead to a great game. It leads to Highguard, Concord, Dustborn, or even Battleborn. Remember that game from years ago? That game died really fast as well. This is why I'm worried about Sony, because they also keep trying to do this too. That new Horizon Hunters game has me worried because they have Guerrilla Games making that over a Horizon 3. Like, why would you do that? If you looked at a potential Horizon 3 versus a live service Fortnite looking spin-off title, did no one have the balls to stand up and say that Horizon 3 is the better bet because it is? If Hunters fails, like, Horizon is cooked. The main studio would be hit with layoffs. It would be utterly disastrous for Sony to lose that talent. If you want a comparison that makes sense to what Guerrilla and Sony are doing right now, imagine that instead of Batman Arkham Knight getting made, Rocksteady, after making Arkham City, they went and made Kill the Justice League instead before they made Arkham Knight. That's what Guerrilla is doing here. This is what all these studios are chasing. We're gonna be the next Helldivers or the next Arc Raiders. Instead, you all got laid off, and it sucks because it is avoidable. Here's another developer who confirmed that they were being laid off as well at Wildlight, this time someone who works in rigging and technical art. Again, a waste of potential and something the industry doesn't need more of, and this guy will show up later in the video, trust me, and it's gonna be nuclear. But anyways, Jeff Keighley even weighed in on Highguard Filling, which he claimed would be an amazing game, where he said this: an unfortunate, brutal, and sad outcome for a game I enjoyed in early playtests. Kada, another YouTuber, would then reply to Jeff and say this: Jeff, this is mainly your fault. The game would have been underperforming regardless, but your overhype made the backlash 100 times worse. And some may see that as harsh to say, but it's kind of true, honestly. I mean, Highguard was your big showstopper at the Game Awards 2025. Jeff Keighley overhyped it, made it seem like it was the next coming of Christ himself, and then it ended up being what it was. This is what I mean by toxic positivity. Jeff is pretty much the poster boy of such a concept. I don't mean that in a bad way, but it is what it is. Like, bless his heart, I know he loves video games, and that's great of him, but Jeff needs to sometimes take his emotion out of the way when it comes to his own critical thinking. thinking. Just because you know the developers behind it doesn't automatically mean that it's going to be a great game. Like, Jeff should have been honest with Wildlight's people there and told them internally, look, there's parts of here that are good, but this game mode that you guys are shipping with, this is not it. But he wouldn't do that, of course, because these industry types are, again, all about fake positivity. Everything's going to be great. Trust me, okay? Don't worry at all. Every game will make it. Come on. It's childlike beliefs, unfortunately. If I was in that playtest, I would have been brutal as brutal can be, but you have to realize something. That brutality doesn't come from a place of hate or disdain, despite what people might think. It comes from a genuine concern that what's being made needs to be amazing, or what usually happens ends up happening like it always does. It just keeps happening, right? Highguard's entire dev team is pretty much laid off now. Reloaded just came out and it's already dead as well. Ubisoft is imploding every other day, it seems, and Horizon Hunters is a gamble that could annihilate the Horizon IP and the makers of it based on how well that does too. All of this and more. And then you just have to ask yourself, is this gamble really truly worth the payoff in the long run? Can we not go back to traditional gaming or what this has become? Are we really letting entire studios that are full of talented people stifling their potential because we need another Apex or a Fortnite again for the millionth time? Despite the fact that what has been winning Game of the Year for years now has been nothing but single player games or games with co-op at best. Elden Ring won Game of the Year, Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. It Takes Two had co-op but no multiplayer online live service slot. Baldur's Gate 3, a great game, also had co-op, wasn't a live service. Astrobot was strictly single player. The Last of Us Part 2 single player, that won in 2020. The last time a multiplayer only game won Game of the Year at the Game Awards, if you don't remember, that was Overwatch in 2016. That was 10 years ago. Yet instead of learning where the taste and what people want is going, these studios are instead stuck in the same rat race hamster wheel, chasing that 2016 Overwatch high while completely ignoring the past 10 years of games and then some that have done well, and they all have one thing in common. They're single player games first before anything else. This is why I don't think the industry will honestly learn anything from Highguard, because they will just see it as a failure, but their next game, whoever is the next studio making a live service game, that's what I mean, will think, no. We'll be the next Arc Raiders, guys, trust us. We will dethrone Fortnite. We're gonna beat Helldivers 2 somehow, like, come on. And this cycle will just repeat ad nauseum forever until eventually, after all these games fail, all that will be left to play, ironically, are single player games. Because that's what people want, obviously, but you then have to ask, what was the mission here in the first place? You had a bunch of Apex Legends developers who got tired of the AAA gaming space and wanted to forge their own destiny and vision that was free from the shackles of corporate nonsense, only to then make their own studio where they would then make another AAA live service game in that same headspace and concept that they ran from, ironically making them yet again shackled by their own free will to the same form of corporate nonsense again. I have to ask, what was the point of all of this then? If you ask me, what killed Highguard is pretty simple. It was toxic positivity. It was that nobody who worked on it had the balls to just say, hey guys, what we're making isn't working here. Maybe we should pivot. Instead, they just kept doing it business as usual. They kept making this thing believing that it would be amazing. Again, it was reported a while back. This game was done in early 2025. Wildlight spent the majority of 2025 just polishing the game, and yet despite all of this, they launched this thing with a few maps, some guns, barely anything meaningful to chase, no level up systems of any kind at all. Again, what was the point of this? Then you have Josh Sebel. Remember that tech artist I showed earlier? Well, he decided to write a massive rant about shipping Highguard. Here's the post, by the way, so you can see what I'm referencing here. The part that baffles me and tells me this is nothing short of toxic positivity is that Josh Sebel opens his rant by saying that his game couldn't have failed based on what he was told about it from others, as it says here. Everyone I knew who had any connection to the team or project had the same sentiments. This is lightning in a bottle. I trust this team wholeheartedly. If there's one project nobody in the industry is worried will fail, it's yours. This has mainstream hit written all over it. There's no way this will flop. I could play this all day. Josh Sebel then blames content creators. I'm not kidding, and here's what he said. But then the trailer came out, and it was all downhill from there. Content creators love to point out the bias in folks who give positive previews after being flown out for an event, but ignore the fact that when their negative-leaning content gets 10 times the engagement of the positive, they got just as much incentive to lean into a disingenuous direction, whether consciously or not. Interesting. So it was negative content that did in Highguard, was it? You do realize that content like that was being made by pretty much everyone, right? Like everyone. Unanimously, pretty much every content creator, whether you want to claim they're a grifter or not, they spoke on this game like openly. You understand that, Josh. You do. I hope you do. I really hope you do. So everyone but the people who made it are to blame for the game's failure. That's where we're going with this. But my God, look at what Josh says next. Let me read it for you. The hate started immediately. In addition to dogpiling on the trailer, I personally came under fire due to my naivety on Twitter, which almost all of my now former coworkers had learned to avoid during their previous game launches. After setting my Twitter account to private to protect my sanity, many content creators made videos and posts about me and my cowardice, amassing millions of views and inadvertently sending hundreds of angry gamers into my replies. They laughed at me for being proud of the game, told me to get out the McDonald's applications, and mocked me for listing having autism in my biography, which they seemed to think was evidence that the game would be woke trash. All of this was very emotionally taxing. Yeah, I never called your game woke trash even once. You can quote me on that, by the way, and I also never sent anyone to harass you, Josh, or anyone else that worked on Highguard. Literally ever. You can, again, quote me on that one, I'm being honest. I have said it so many times on my channel, no matter what the topic, if you watch my videos for a long time, I tell my viewers never to harass or attack any of the people I speak about in my videos. I always tell people to act like reasonable, just act like adults, okay? That's the point here. I can't speak for everyone, of course, but for my audience and like me personally, I never did that to Highguard. I even gave you guys ideas on how to fix the game in one of my videos about this, which involved capturing points for buffs and more. But okay then, Josh then, as seen here, claims, as you can see, the vast majority of negative Steam reviews came from people who didn't finish the tutorial, and that gamer culture is what led to the annihilation of Highguard. That's a negative discourse that played a role according to him. But this next part is just, wolf, man. Let me read you what it says. Many of Wildlight's former developers will now be forced to assimilate back into the actual corporate industry many gamers accuse Wildlight of being a part of. Now, every time someone thinks about leaving the golden handcuffs behind in favor of making a new multiplayer game the indie way, they'll say, but remember how gamers didn't even give Wildlight a chance. Soon, if this pattern continues, all that will be left are corporations, at least in the multiplayer space. Innovation is on life support. I disagree. Multiplayer games are probably going to be fine. The point is that we don't need more that just do nothing new. Like, that is what Highguard is, whether they want to admit it or not, right? Arc Raiders already disproves this. The problem is that Highguard has no redeeming quality. Sure, your pals may have told you internally that the game was amazing and that it has mainstream appeal all over it, but again, that's the toxic positivity speaking. That's what always happens. The problem is game development lives in this space where no one is able to be critical of anything. You can't risk offending someone or taking what they made and saying, yeah, this part is good, this part is bad, maybe you should change it. Instead, we're just supposed to accept everything as being a miracle and oh my God, it's amazing. And if we don't, you just label people as grifters. That's not how this works. The game is capture the flag mixed with search and destroy with horses and Overwatch powers. I don't really know what you guys expected here, but this wasn't it. The rest of his post is just Josh saying that he loved working at Wildlight, and that's great, but honestly, this just proves that these types of games need more feedback from actual people, not those that are being wined and dined and you're buying flights for, because of course they're going to be positive. You paid for everything. Like, what did you expect? Anyone with a brain that played Highguard for even an hour, they would go, yeah, this probably isn't it. The game isn't bad, mind you, but like amazing? Who are we kidding? Either way, this post reeks of anger and childish tantrums. I would wager this Josh guy will delete this post before long because it just looks bad for him and Wildlight and Highguard and his future prospects. But again, these sorts of things usually get written in a state of anger, so I get that. Best you can probably do is just move on, learn from this failure, but it doesn't seem like Josh here will. He's being very emotional, and that's obvious. And you said it yourself, Josh. You guys had your shot to strike out on your own with royalties as a way of making your game, and that does sound great. Maybe you guys should have made something that wasn't in a saturated genre, maybe if you wanted a chance. Like I kept saying in my videos on Highguard before, you guys should have made it like a single player co-op game instead, but no, you chased the exact same model of the games that you already left behind, so what did you expect? No public playtest, basically zero footage minus a trailer before launch, nothing, no Reddit AMAs. You guys thought you had lightning in a bottle, but honestly, instead, it was more like a fart. Either way, as you can see, this failure will happen again in due time until developers and studios realize they need to be open to real criticism and actually ask themselves the hard questions. Then if they don't, then the same things will just continue to get made time and time again. I would say I feel sorry, but after reading Josh's response saying that me and others are to blame, I don't feel bad anymore. I had sympathy for Wildlight. I gave you guys ideas on how to fix the game. I gave you the harsh criticism you apparently wanted too. And all I'm getting in return is hostility, so I'm good. So long, Highguard. You truly did become Concord 2.0 in the end. Thanks for watching, subscribe, and for the love of God, man, enough with the toxic positivity. Seriously, enough.